now we're going to take a look at the cube configuration. So what we need to take a look at for the cube configuration is first we're going to take a look at some of the configuration for the voice service VoIP. Okay. And all of these configurations are going to have to be matched on the secondary router. They have to match, they should match exactly, so that in the case of a failover, that the same configuration is going to be there. So there's no difference in that configuration. Okay, so we already put the redundancy group in for when we were looking at the high availability. So now we're going to put in, do a mode border element. Oh, that needs a dash. All right, that tells us that we need to reload the router. We will do that later. And we're going to do allow connections, SIP to SIP. Okay, we're going to go into our SIP configuration and we're going to put in early offer forced. Okay, and we'll exit out of that. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that on the secondary router as well. Okay, service VoIP. Okay, mode border element. Tells us we need to reload, and then we need to do allow connections, SIP to SIP. We don't need to do H323 to SIP or H323. We're not doing that on this router. We're doing SIP only. So we don't want to introduce anything that's H323 on this. And we'll go into the SIP and early offer forced. Okay, now we need to take a look at some of our voice class commands. Now these are very good commands. I really like them. Really help with the configuration. So first we're going to do a voice class URI CUCM SIP. Now what this is being used for is to match calls that are coming from the call manager IP addresses. Now whether that is one call manager or several call managers, you can put that in here. Okay, now if you had a couple of such subscribers that calls are going to be coming from, that's where you would put that. You would continue to do that. Okay, and that means that it will match from any of the IP addresses of the call manager service. Okay, and now we need to do that same thing for the carrier. Okay, now this is the SIP proxy address that the carrier gives you, that the calls coming inbound from the carrier are going to be addressed with. Okay, and now I don't have a carrier set up right now, so I am just going to do a bogus IP address just to show you exactly what it needs to be done. All right, so that voice class is done. Next is going to be the voice class E164 pattern map. Now I really like the E164 pattern map because prior to this, if you had different pattern ranges that you needed to do, you would have to have another set of dial pairs to be able to do that. And with the E164 pattern map, you can have one dial pair. but specify all the different patterns that are going to be in that are going to be matched in there. And so I really like that. So in this case, we're just going to put in so you can see exactly what that is. So in this case, it's a full E164 number. So as you can see, I have two different ranges. Maybe this can be two different ranges that, in this case, I probably could have put in, brackets with the 4, 5, yeah. But in some cases where those ranges are not contiguous, that's where this really helps, okay? Or maybe you don't have full E164, maybe you just have your 4-digit extensions. You can put the 4-digit extensions. It doesn't have to be a full E164 number. It just uses that name of the E164. But this is just to tell it what patterns are going to be in this pattern map. Okay. Now, for this particular situation, we're going to take, for the carrier side, and we're going to say anything coming from call manager is going to be sent to the carrier. Okay. That helps us in that we know that we're going to be using the URI to do this. So we know that our call managers are good. They're good IP addresses. So anything coming from the call managers are most likely going to be good numbers and not going to be fraud. And so we're going to say, okay, anything coming from call manager is okay, and we're going to send it out to the carrier. Okay, so that's what that one does, the .t. Okay, next we're going to do a voice class DPG. Okay, at the dial peer group. Now, I can't put in the dial peer here yet because I haven't put in the dial peer. Okay, if I try to say use dial peer, so dial peer 100, it's going to give me an error. There's no dial peer. Okay, so this is kind of a chicken and the egg kind of thing. Is we can't put in the dial peer yet because the dial pairs aren't there into the dial peer group. So we need to go configure the dial peer. But then on the dial peer, we can't configure a dial peer group in the dial peer unless the dial peer group is configured in the voice class. So it's kind of a strange situation in that configuration. So it's good to go ahead and take care of this so that we can have that ready, and then we'll come back to this and put the dial pairs in. Okay. Now what we need is our server groups. So voice class server group 1. Okay. We're going to put a description in here telling us that this is going to call manager. Okay. And so we'll put our call manager address in here. Now, if you had multiple addresses, let's say you had 2 subscribers that were doing your calling, but you wanted to use one first and the other second as an overflow if something happened to the first one. Then you can put in a preference in there. So let's say we did IPv4. Let's say we had a subscriber at 26. And then we could do if you do a question mark there, we've got a preference statement that we can put in there. And we can say, we spell that right. And we're going to say that's going to be a preference of 1, whereas the first one is default a preference of 0. Okay, so that's how that would work. again, previous to having server groups, we had to create a different dial pair for each session target that we wanted. In this case, with server groups, we can put multiple uh, servers in there pointing at the different call managers that we wanted to point it at. And if something goes down, then the dial pair will know that it can go to the secondary one. Okay. And now we need the server group for the carrier. And so this is for if you've got two different um, areas, two different IP addresses that you can send to that maybe for the carrier that are geographically separated, but they're the same carrier. And you can do the same thing that we did with Call Manager. You can put in secondary IP address with a preference in there if we wanted to do that, or you can just put it in without the preference and it'll do it in a round robin fashion. All right. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at our dial pairs. Now, the way I have this set up is we're only doing two dial pairs, okay? For each call, as you know, there has to be an inbound dial pair and an outbound dial pair, okay? In this case, if the calls are going from Call Manager out to the carrier, we're going to have one dial pair that's the inbound dial pair, and then a second dial pair that's the outbound dial pair going to the carrier. And vice versa, if the call is coming from the carrier to Call Manager, we're going to have that same outbound dial pair is going to be our inbound dial pair. And then our inbound dial pair is going to be our outbound dial pair. So I'll show you how that works. So we're going to do our VoIP dial pair. We're going to put a description in here saying that this dial pair is going to Call Manager. That's our outbound dial pair to Call Manager. Okay. Now this is a SIP dial pair, so we got to put our session protocol SIP v2. Okay. We tell it where it's going, which is our server group. Okay. We're going to give it our dial peer group information, and I'll go over this after we have both of them set up of what the dial peer group is going to do. And then we have our destination E164 pattern map for the numbers in Call Manager. And then for our incoming calls, we're going to do incoming URI via CCM is how it's defined. Okay. Now the codec, I'm just going to do Codec Transparent. And what that means is that the cube is going to be completely transparent as far as codec. It's not going to change any codecs. So if Call Manager is sending out at G711, it's going to send to the carrier at G711 and be completely transparent on that. Same thing goes for the carrier. If the carrier sends in the call at G711, it's going to send it to Call Manager at G711. Or if it sends it in at G729, it's going to send it to Call Manager at G729. And so there is no transcoding, there is no change in codec. Okay? And then we need to tell it this is the internal interface that we're going to bind our control and media to. Source, interface, and that's our internal interface. So we're going to do the same thing for the media. And then we need our DTMF. RTP NTE, which is the RFC 2833, and no VAT. All right, so that is our dial pair 1. Okay, now let's take a look at our 100. Let's take a look at our dial pair 200. Okay, this is the one that's going to be inbound from the carrier and outbound to the carrier. Okay, so we're going to say description to SIP carrier. Okay, it's a SIP dial pair. We're going to say our server group 2. We're going to say our destination DPG 1 for our dial pair group, and destination E164 pattern map 2. Okay, now we're going to do our incoming URI via SIP carrier, which is how it was defined in the voice class. Again, we're going to do a codec transparent and our voice class commands. Binding the control and media. Source interface, this time it is gigabit 1, which is our outside interface. And media. And then we have our DTMF, RTP, NTE, and no VAT. Now, as I told you before, that we would have to revisit this, so we do our voice class DPG1. Now we have these defined, so dial pair 100, and now we go to voice class DPG2, dial pair 200. Okay, now let me tell you what that's doing. Go down to our dial pairs here. Okay, so again, like I said, we have 2 dial pairs. That's all we're going to have. We're not going to have several dial pairs for the different patterns. We're not going to have several dial pairs for the different call managers. We're not going to have anything like that. We have inbound and outbound dial pairs for both ways. And so the way this works, let's talk about outbound calls from call manager. So the call is going to come in and we have our incoming URI via call manager, okay? In the Cisco documentation, the incoming URI takes precedence over any incoming call number or destination pattern or anything like that. And so it's going to come first. So our incoming URI, it's going to accept any call from the call manager IP addresses. And then what we have here is that's what our dial pair group DPG2 is doing. It's going to say that in anything coming from call manager, we're going to be accepted into this dial pair, and we're going to send it directly to dial pair 200. Okay, so it's going to go here. It's going to check our destination E164 pattern map 2, which is a .t. That's going to go through, and then it's going to take a look at our servers, our destination, our IP addresses, which is in server group 2, which is our carrier IPs, and it's going to send it along. Okay, same thing goes on the other side. So we have incoming URI via SIP carrier. So anything coming from the SIP carrier IP addresses is going to be accepted into this dial pair and then automatically sent to dial pair 1. or 100 from our dial peer group configuration here, which that is set for, it's going to check our E164 pattern map 1 and make sure that the numbers are what we have specified there, and then send it off to our call manager's IP addresses. And that's how that works. So that's the configuration of the cube. Uh, uh, Default configuration. Now again, if we have HA, we would need to do that same configuration on the secondary router so that it can have the exact same configuration. And call manager pointing to the virtual IP in our HA, carrier again pointing to our virtual IP in the HA. So that's it. I hope you like this video. If you do, please please comment below. Let me know what your experience has been with this. And if you have any problems with it, comment below. Maybe I can help you out. So please please subscribe. Help me to do more of these videos. And we'll talk to you guys later.